Authority is not declared. It is not announced in a bio or constructed through a posting schedule or assembled from the right combination of aesthetics and hashtags. It is recognized. It arrives in the way people speak about you when you are not in the room, in the quality of the opportunities that find you without you pursuing them, in the particular kind of attention you generate when you appear, not the reactive, momentary kind that a provocative post generates, but the settled, oriented kind that happens when a room, physical or digital, registers that someone with genuine substance has arrived. That recognition cannot be manufactured, but it can be cultivated. And cultivating it requires understanding something that most personal branding advice gets exactly backward. Most advice about building a digital presence is additive. Do more, post more, be more visible, more consistent, more optimized, more present across more platforms, more responsive to more people in more places. The underlying assumption is that presence is built through accumulation, that the more of you that exists in the digital space, the more substantial your presence becomes. This assumption is wrong. Not just strategically wrong, but psychologically wrong. Because presence, real presence, the kind that generates authority and genuine intrigue, and the specific magnetic quality that makes people take you seriously, is not built through accumulation. It is built through coherence. And coherence is not about how much you share, it is about how precisely what you share reflects who you actually are. The most elegantly magnetic digital presences share a specific quality that is visible once you know to look for it. Every piece of content they publish, every platform they occupy, every way they communicate publicly reflects the same essential person. Not the same topics, not the same format, not the same aesthetic necessarily, but the same sensibility, the same underlying intelligence, the same values expressed through different mediums, the same voice that is recognizable whether it appears in a 3-minute video or a single-sentence caption or a long-form essay. This coherence creates something that fragmented, high-volume presence almost never creates, the sense that there is a real, whole person behind what you are seeing, and a real, whole person in a digital landscape populated primarily by optimized performances is deeply, almost startlingly compelling. Building this kind of coherent presence begins not with content strategy, but with what I am going to call clarity of self. This is not a vague personal development concept. It is a practical prerequisite. You cannot project coherence outward if you do not have clarity inward. And clarity inward means being able to answer, with specificity rather than generality, a small set of foundational questions. What do you actually know? Not what you have studied casually or have passing interest in, but what you understand at a level deep enough that you could teach it, argue for it, complicate it, and defend it under examination. What do you actually believe? Not the positions that are safe and socially acceptable in your space, but the genuine convictions that came from your own thinking and experience and would survive being challenged. What do you actually stand for? The thing that, if you removed it from your work, would make your work unrecognizable as yours. These are not branding questions, they are identity questions, but the answers to them are what everything else gets built on. Once you have clarity there, the next layer is what could be called your signature lens, the specific angle through which you see and interpret the world that is distinctly, recognizably yours. Every woman who has built genuine authority online has one, and it is what makes her work irreplaceable rather than interchangeable. It is not a niche in the conventional content sense. It is more fundamental than that. It is the particular way your mind works, the specific connections you draw between ideas, the recurring themes that surface in everything you make, regardless of the surface-level topic. The questions you cannot stop asking because they are not strategic questions, but genuine ones. This lens is already yours. The work is not to create it, but to identify it clearly enough to trust it and use it consciously. Think about a woman named Elena. She had spent 2 years trying to find her content niche by following the conventional advice: identify an underserved audience, research their pain points, create content that addresses those pain points. The approach generated some growth, but it never felt like hers. The content was technically competent and occasionally performed well, but it had the quality of something assembled rather than expressed. When Elena stopped trying to identify her niche and started paying attention to what she actually could not stop thinking about, she discovered something simpler and more specific. She was obsessed with the relationship between aesthetics and decision-making, why beautiful things made people behave differently, how physical environments shaped psychological states, how design was a form of invisible influence. This was not a standard content category, it was a lens. And when she started writing and speaking through that lens, rather than toward a predetermined audience segment, something changed in the texture of her work that was immediately recognizable to people who encountered it. It was no longer competent, it was interesting. The specificity of her angle made her irreplaceable in a way that the optimized approach never had. The practical architecture of an elegant digital presence is built on 3 structural elements that work together to create authority without overexposure. The first is a primary depth platform, the place where your most complete, most substantial, most fully developed thinking lives. This is where you go long, where you do not optimize for consumption speed, but for genuine transfer of understanding, where your audience has to bring their full attention in order to receive what you are offering. This might be a newsletter, a podcast, a long-form blog, a YouTube channel where you build ideas across episodes rather than chasing individual views. The specific medium matters less than the function it serves, a place where the complete version of your thinking is available to anyone who wants to understand not just what you think, but how you think and why. The second structural element is a curated public surface, the more visible, more accessible platform where people first encounter you, where discovery happens, where the compressed, distilled version of your thinking circulates. This is where you are selective with extraordinary care. Every piece of content on this surface should function as a window into the depth platform, a glimpse precise enough to intrigue without being complete enough to satisfy. You are not giving your full thinking here. You are offering a quality sample, something specific enough to be genuinely useful or genuinely interesting on its own, but shaped in a way that makes the person who encounters it want to know more. The curated public surface is where your signature lens is most visible and most consistently expressed, and where the gap between what you show and what you clearly contain is the engine of your magnetism. The third structural element is what might be called a real room, a smaller, more intimate space where the people who have moved from casual discovery to genuine investment in your work can access a different quality of connection. This could be a paid community, a newsletter tier, an invitation-only space, a regular gathering of some kind. The specific form is less important than the principle, that there is a place where your most engaged audience receives something that is genuinely more valuable and more personal than what the public surface offers. This tiered architecture creates something crucial for sustainable authority. It gives your audience a direction to move in. Discovery at the public surface, depth at the primary platform, belonging in the real room. Each layer is more valuable than the previous one, and the presence of deeper layers makes the surface level feel more significant because the person encountering it knows, even if they cannot fully articulate it, that there is more here than what they are currently seeing. Now, let us talk about the specific way you show up across these elements without overexposing yourself, because the question of what to share and what to protect does not get less important as your authority grows. In some ways, it becomes more important, because as your platform expands, the cost of getting this wrong increases. More people means more potential for your words to be taken out of context, more potential for a single piece of content to define you in the minds of people who have not encountered the full depth of your work, more potential for the curated surface to begin to feel like the whole rather than the entry point. The discipline of strategic selectivity at scale is about understanding that your authority is directly proportional to the gap between your visible surface and your implied depth. When people can see all of you, there is no depth to imply. When people can see a precisely chosen portion of you and feel the presence of everything that is not being shown, the effect is entirely different. You want every public expression to feel like a signal from a larger interior, a transmission from a mind that clearly contains more than is being transmitted right now. This is not deception, it is accuracy, because if you have done the clarity of self-work, the implied depth is real. You are not creating an illusion, you are offering an invitation. Consider how this applies practically to the way you communicate about your own knowledge and expertise. There is a specific difference between demonstrating competence and demonstrating mastery. Competence is shown through the right answers. Mastery is shown through the quality of the questions. A woman demonstrating competence online is sharing what she knows. A woman demonstrating mastery is sharing what she is still thinking about, what she has changed her mind about, what she finds genuinely unresolved. The second approach is more authoritative, not less, because it signals a relationship with her subject matter that goes beyond information into genuine understanding. Anyone can learn information. Only someone with real depth has the security to share their uncertainty without it feeling like a confession of inadequacy. This applies equally to how you handle public disagreement and criticism. The woman building elegant authority does not engage with every criticism, and she does not ignore all of it. She distinguishes carefully between criticism that is engaged and substantive, the kind that tells her something she needs to know, and criticism that is reactionary or designed to provoke. The first she takes seriously, responds to thoughtfully when warranted, and allows to inform her work over time. The second she allows to pass without response, not because she is above it or afraid of it, but because responding would grant it the authority it has not earned. The way you choose what deserves your engagement is one of the most visible signals of the standard you hold. Every time you respond with dignity and selectivity, you reinforce the sense that your attention is not freely given. Every time you respond from reactivity or defensiveness, you diminish the quality of the presence you have worked to build. Think about a woman named Vera. She built authority in the creative industries over 4 years through a combination of long-form writing on a weekly newsletter and a carefully maintained public profile where she shared, on average, 3 to 4 times per week. Nothing she shared publicly was produced in the moment of posting. Everything had been thought about first, not necessarily written in advance, but inhabited. She knew what she was going to say before she said it, and what she chose not to say was as deliberate as what she chose to share. Her newsletter, where she went deep and long and personal in ways her public profile never did, was where her authority was actually anchored. Her public profile was where people found her. Her newsletter was where they stayed. When an opportunity arrived, and they arrived regularly once her reputation had developed enough critical mass, it was almost always from someone who had been reading her newsletter for months or years, someone who knew not just what she thought, but how she thought, and who wanted access to that specific quality of mind for a specific purpose. That is how authority translates into real-world consequence, not through going viral, through being known specifically and thoroughly by exactly the right people. The elegant digital presence is not built in a month. It is not the result of a rebranding exercise or a content audit or a change in aesthetic direction. It is the accumulated expression of a woman who knows what she is about, who trusts that knowing enough to let it guide every public choice she makes, and who is patient enough to let the recognition come at the pace that genuine authority demands, rather than forcing it through volume. It asks a lot. It asks for the clarity that only comes from real self-examination. It asks for the discipline of restraint in an environment that rewards the opposite. It asks for the patience to build something structural when the incentives all point towards something immediate. But what it produces is categorically different from what the performance for attention approach produces. It produces a digital presence that belongs to you completely, that grows stronger as you grow, rather than requiring you to suppress your growth to stay on brand. That attracts the specific people and opportunities and collaborations that are genuinely aligned with who you are, rather than who you performed yourself into being. It produces something that does not depend on the algorithm to survive, because it is rooted in your reputation rather than your reach. And reputation, as we said in the last episode, is structural. It outlasts every platform change, every algorithm shift, every trend cycle, every moment when the thing that was working stops working, because it is not built on any of those things. It is built on you, the real version, the one that has been there all along, waiting for you to trust it enough to let it lead. If this episode gave you a clearer picture of what you are actually building and how you want to build it, leave the word authority in the comments. That word tells me you have arrived at a different level of intention than where you started this series. Subscribe, because the final episode brings everything full circle in a way that I think will surprise you, and you will want to have been here from the beginning to feel the full weight of where we land.